Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live. I'm Ken Coughlin.
And I'm Ben Lander.
And I'm back. Thank you very much, everybody. I want to say, before we get going here, I want to say a very special thank you to Allison Mayer for filling in last week.
Thank you, Allison.
If you didn't get to watch her episode, go back, watch that last week. It was great. And I needed just the mental health break. I think Ben kind of explained last week that I was here. I even chimed in at one point, and my hand made an appearance. But just, it's not just, these types of shows, people think, oh, they just get on, they turn on the TV or turn on the camera, they just start talking. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. And so even when it just comes to, designing the graphics and everything like that, it's just one more layer of having to read the stories and get ready to talk about them and, plan out what you're going to say. We actually do research and stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, we actually did put some effort into this.
And so I do really appreciate it because it did save me that and free up some other time. So thank you very much, Allison. It was wonderful, and I think she did a good enough job that we can try to get her back on the show again down the line. Yeah. So yeah, there you go. Hey, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. If it's your first time watching the show, the byline says it all. What we aim to do here is we talk about things that people are talking about around the water cooler out there in the world. In other words, a lot of this, it can be things that people are talking about just in the community, the culture at large. It can be things that we're talking about specifically within the Christian community. But we try to do and try to make the show unique is we do attempt to bring a uniquely Christian perspective to the program. So there's no shortage of places out there you can go to get everybody's opinion about everything. But there is a shortage of places you can go where you can get people's opinion who are at least trying to make Christ the top priority in the discussions that they're having. And that's what we try to do here. We'll see how much we succeed. But the important thing also, another important thing to remember is that this is not just a conversation between Ben and I. You are invited to be part of the conversation as, what, really?
You.
Hi, you are invited to be part of the conversation as well.
It's called Flourish.
And the way you do that is we are currently streaming this live on two outlets, both the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel and the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. I have both of them sitting here on my trusty computer in front of me. And so if you have a thought, question, agree with us, disagree with us on any of the topics tonight, you are invited to put your comment in the live chat on YouTube or in the comment section on Facebook. When you do that, number one, you will see your comment appear in that box over there to the left of Ben's head. And also, I will see it here on the computer. And once we have a natural break in the conversation, we'll address it. We'll bring it up. I'll mention what your comment is, as long as it's appropriate. Obviously, we'll put that caveat on there. And so that you can be part of the conversation as well. We invite that. That makes the show more fun and more interesting. I do have to say, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's
I'm
Day.
Irish. Apparently, Ben hates the Irish.
I am actually, I'm very much part Irish.
Yeah.
But I'm always wearing my green.
Oh, wait, I know what he's showing off. Yeah. Can you get it? Can you get the sleeve up high enough?
I don't know. I've been working out too much.
Bring it in, and there you go. Can we see?
Somewhere over there. Yeah.
Tell him what it says.
Semper Fidelis. So a lot of times people ask
me, he thinks he's a Marine.
Am I Marine? No. It's really just the Latin phrase for always faithful, which on doing some family history research, my family used that as sort of a family motto when they came over from Ireland. So yes, I forgot to wear my green today, but I always have some green.
Always have green. Well, I always tell people.
Okay, Irish check. Do you know what percentage you are Irish? Just wondering.
Oh, man.
Ballpark it.
Ballparkish of like 32%, something like that.
Okay, what about you, Ken?
I don't, but majority. Because Coughlin is an Irish name, and so the problem is my family went from Ireland over to England at some point, and they were actually in England when they came over to America. So even if you look at my English roots, technically I'm part English, but even my English roots go back to Ireland. So I don't know the exact percentage, but that's kind of how it works.
I'm 3/8 Irish, so that's 37.5%.
Yeah.
So. I think I'm such a mix of things, but I think Irish is the most of any one particular ethnicity that I am. So.
Well, I always say when people criticize, now of course I am wearing my green today, but if I ever have a St. Patrick's Day and if I'm not wearing green, people criticize me for it. I say, look, when you're Irish, you bleed green. You don't need to be wearing green,
No.
you know? So, all right. Shall we get started with our topics tonight?
Sounds good to me.
All right. We got 4 topics for you tonight. If you like them,
I'm having trouble.
Interrupted. Yeah.
I know I'm having trouble with both of them right now. So if you're out there and you can chat with us, please let us know.
That's
Let us
interesting.
know if it's working or not.
Okay, it's back on YouTube. So we appear to still be live,
Okay, good.
but yeah, I don't know. We're having some bandwidth issues here, and we're live on Facebook. So, yeah, I'm looking at myself telling. So, if anybody out there is watching, can tell us if the show was interrupted at all. Let
It
us
looks
know.
like it keeps getting interrupted. So, but Jeanette Harrington did just say that Facebook is back.
Okay,
So
did
it
get-
was interrupted at some point.
Yeah, it just we might not be able to live chat as live as we hope.
It's lively. Well, we'll do our best. That's interesting. I wonder.
It is.
It's got to, considering you're having it there, you're seeing it there, and I'm seeing it here. It's got to be an issue that we're having with the internet here. Katie Lander says you were live, but it keeps trying to buffer or load.
Interesting.
Interesting. All right. Well, we're going to do the best we can and say a prayer, but I can't change our internet. So let's hopefully it continues to work and gets better as we go along through the show.
Yeah.
All right. So Ben, why don't you go ahead and tell us what our first story is tonight?
All right, so our first story comes out of a couple news outlets. The one that I'll be mostly referring to is from churchleaders.com. And if you're unfamiliar with the famous gospel artist Kirk Franklin, then you've probably been living under a rock. He's a 6-time Grammy Award winner. He's collaborated with multiple different famous, both Christian and non-Christian celebrities, such as Toby Mac. I think Whitney Houston was on here. So anyway, Kirk Franklin apparently for years has had a, as he describes it, toxic relationship with his son. And so this came to a head recently within the past couple weeks where they had a heated argument in which Kirk kind of lost his cool and ended up just having this exchange with his son that was riddled with expletives. So we're not going to, of course, say what any of that was. However, his son chose to record that exchange and posted it to his social media account. I believe it was Twitter, and kind of just exposed this interaction, which has then gotten a lot of feedback. People on both sides of this argument, whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for his son to do this. And Carrion is Kirk Franklin's son's name. And basically, after all of this came out, Kirk issued an apology, stating to the community, basically that explaining the nature of his son's relationship with him, that he felt extremely disrespected, and that there's more to the story. Apparently, they have a family therapist that Kirk was able to get on the phone at the time of the conversation, but his son was not interested in engaging with the therapist. But that part was not included in the viral upload. So all of this came out, and then Kirk's apology has been issued, and now Christians are responding to it. So what is your response to this exchange?
Well, first thing I'm going to say that I'm looking right now on YouTube, and I am seeing that several people have commented. We mentioned Katie, and then Allison Mayer said yes, it was interrupted, and said YouTube is back. Just cut out again. I'm looking at my YouTube feed right now. Seems to have cleared up a bit, so it seems to be better now. My Facebook one's still not great. Yeah. So one thing I did notice is that none of those comments though are appearing next to Ben. So that might be an issue with the bandwidth or something we're having here. Please continue to comment, even if not appearing over there. I am still seeing them here. So we will still be able to address them as we go. And my YouTube feed just froze again, but now it seems to be back. So I don't know. All right. So in relation to the Kirk Franklin story, one of the things that that he mentioned when he was responding to this is that there were other portions of the conversation that were not included in the recording, where he was trying to get their family therapist on the line and things like that. And I think, I'm going to I've got no Facebook feed or YouTube right now. I don't know if anybody else does, but this is a problem. Tell you what, you share what you want about it. I'm going to see if I can do anything about this internet issue. So,
Yeah, I would agree that it behooves us. Sure. Well, and it's the biblical response too. Is everyone should be. Oh, we're getting some comments. I can't read those at the moment, so I think.
No. Just keep going.
Okay. The biblical response is that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Yes, as a people who are responding to this, and we also have to be very careful not to cross the line into gossip, and that becomes very when it comes to celebrities, because they are public figures, their name is out there already, and when somebody must do so in a manner of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? It goes on to say he must not be a recent convert, he may become conceited. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so they will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. So there's a whole list that Paul gives Timothy, and it's elsewhere too. He gives it in Titus, of qualifications of eldership. Now, would we put a Christian celebrity in the office of?
Ben, say hi.
Hi. Hopefully, we're back.
All right. So, if anybody is still watching, here's what happened. All right. I don't know what happened with the internet in the building here. But we obviously, because you don't want to live stream through a mobile hotspot or through Wi-Fi, you plug directly into the wall, and the computer was going haywire. It was switching over to Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi here in the building is not wonderful in my office. I call my office the dungeon for a reason. And so we just did not have a good enough internet connection. It kept going out. Now, the way things are situated right now, we are currently live streaming through my phone's mobile hotspot. All right.
What carrier do you have?
I have T-Mobile. I have unlimited data, so we're good in that regard. The quality of the stream from this point onward might not be very good.
It'll be a testimony to T-Mobile's infrastructure.
So we'll find out, but we're going to try to get through at least a couple of these stories here because it's already 6:00. So hopefully, here's the catch: is I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I don't want to overtax my mobile hotspot, so I don't want to access the stories here or the comments rather.
We appear to be on both.
All right.
Is anybody commenting? I mean, is anybody actually still watching? So I don't know. That was a lot of dead time.
I think Allison is watching us on YouTube. Can you give me a thumbs up, Allison? Katie is also watching on YouTube. Says it's better now than before.
Oh, good.
All right.
Here, much better. Awesome.
So
I don't think we have a Facebook audience yet.
Because Ben is now responsible for comments. Because and because we are now streaming through my phone's mobile hotspot, please understand there might be some skips, some jumps, things like that. But
yeah, we're already getting a warning about the bit rate. But
yeah, but we're gonna do the best we can to plow through this. All right.
All right. So
Ben, let's back up.
All right,
Tell us the first story, and we'll just try to get through these quicker again, because I don't think anybody really heard.
Be fast.
Yeah. What's the first story?
Well, in the interest, I had to say this. Since you said papers never failed you, maybe we need to send the show out on paper next time.
There you go. Next time, Trinity Talk Live will be by flyers, mailed out by snail mail.
And carrier pigeons. All right, so we're going to back up and reset. Our first story, we're going to fly through these, is Kirk Franklin, Grammy Award winner, and he had this exchange with his son, Kieran, and the exchange got heated. There were some expletives thrown about, and I believe just from Kirk's side, at least, Kieran said he did not exchange in retaliation of the same. That's his side of the story. But then Kieran decided to record this exchange and posted it to his Twitter account, and there's been some fallout since. And then Kirk Franklin has since issued an apology, stating that he should not have used the language that he did. However, he, in the heat of the moment, felt very disrespected by his son. There's another side to this story where apparently there's a family therapist who Kirk tried to get involved, actually got him on the phone, but Carrion would not converse with the therapist, and that part is not reflected in the viral video that was uploaded. And so
Dude, you realize how completely unfair that is, right? You did not, when we were, okay, I'm going to interrupt him right now because when all the glitchiness was happening, you didn't mention that part when you were going through the story. I mentioned that. You just stole my thunder.
Sorry.
You stole my thunder. And nobody, I'm going to call you out because the people, we were all glitching. Nobody knows that Ben just stole my thunder. That was my comment. He just took that. Go ahead.
We're trying to condense that. So
He's
after that
condensing
comment,
me out of existence.
No.
And you're making it longer by complaining.
But it's fun.
So since Ken added that fact, what do you draw out from that?
Well, first of all, we should all acknowledge that despite my allegiance to paper, I think I've proven what I said at the top of the show, if anybody heard me, that I am still a friend of technology because I got us back on the air, at least to some limited extent, very quickly. Anyway, no, but yeah, and that was my first warning that we talked about earlier, is what you mentioned about the fact that, he says that his son, there was more to this discussion than what his son included. And, I think we, not just within the Christian community, but humans at large, have a tendency to, when we see something gets put on the internet, let's jump to judgment right away. We want to rush to judgment right away. And quite often, at least the whole story is not necessarily revealed, because anytime you have one person presenting it and that person, shall we say, has a vested interest in it because they're actually involved in it, then you do have to kind of wonder, are they giving me the whole story? And sometimes they are. I'm not trying to paint wildly and say that everybody's a liar, but we do as humans tend to try to paint things in such a way to make ourselves look good, or at least as good as possible. And so one of the things that Kirk Franklin said in response here was, there was a part of this conversation, right, where I did actually try to get the family counselor and therapist on the phone. And so, because, he's basically trying to say people are trying to paint him out as like he just doesn't like his son. He does, So that's the first thing, is that we might not always have the full story. That being said, and I think the opposite is also problematic, where some people say, well, we don't have the full story, so we shouldn't make any judgments at all. And, I got news for you. If somebody comes out and says, we should kill all X class of people, I'm not going to be so receptive and saying, but you didn't get the full context. There was this other part of the conversation. No,
right.
You shouldn't have said that.
Right.
That was wrong, And I think we have certainly an example of that here, where Mr. Franklin used some words and said some things in such a way that he certainly shouldn't have. And now, does that mean that we judge in such a way to say, you're so bad, you're so naughty? No, anytime we make, and we should make judgments, we do make judgments in the Christian church. That's how we help disciple each other and make us help
Sharpen
out
one another.
Yeah, we check on one another. And so when we're expressing an opinion like that on something like this, when it happens, it does have to be with an awareness that, hey, I ain't perfect. I've screwed up a lot myself, and I want people to be understanding and forgiving of me. So it's a balance you strike in these situations where you call a sin,
right?
And yet you do so humbly, understanding that there's a log in your own eye quite often when you're doing this.
Yeah,
so.
And that whoever's without sin to cast the first stone. Katie says, now that I'm reading the comments, Katie said, while Kirk Franklin made a mistake and fell short, it also wasn't right for his son to take the situation, post it publicly. Two wrongs don't make a right, and I'm pretty sure it was Jesus who said to turn the other cheek. Yeah, Katie, that's essentially what we agree with that.
I am curious of your opinion.
You have to. You're her husband.
I always agree with you, Andy.
And two negatives do make a positive, though.
And I do agree. My gut feeling when I saw this with that was inappropriate to go public with it. He did use the word abuse. All right. And I'm not saying it does. I'm just curious what you think about it. If there was some kind of abusive relationship going on, does that change things? Is the right avenue then to make it public, or is it still wrong to go public on Twitter with it? Is there something else that should be done, I guess?
I guess not having the full story muddies the waters a bit, because if there's abuse, I think they need to seek reconciliation. It doesn't seem like, at least in this exchange, that he was too willing to be seeking reconciliation at that time. At least not willing to talk to this family therapist. They apparently already have a therapist who's already aware of the situation. And so it may be, biblically, if a brother harms you or sins, go to him in private, brother or sister. Go to them in private. If they listen, you've won your brother or sister over. If not, take it to 2 elders of the church. And then if they don't listen, then take it to the church at large. And if not, then maybe to a public forum. Maybe Kyrian was quick to jump to that public forum.
Yeah.
I don't know how much, but apparently it's gone past that 1-on-1 stage and maybe that 2-on or 3-on-1 kind of stage. So I don't know where they're at in that process. So it's hard to say whether or not. But that being said, my initial reaction to this seems like the response that he was trying to elicit by posting this was to damage his father's reputation, even though he claims that it wasn't.
And that's what I'm just trying to be open and open-minded about it. But my gut feeling was the same thing. So even if there was an abusive relationship here, it still seems to me like this wasn't the way to handle it. Right. It's not that you don't go public if you need to, like you're saying, in the appropriate circumstance. But even if you go public, that doesn't necessarily equate to posting it out there on Twitter. I mean, there's other constructive ways to try to do something about it, to remedy it. And I don't know. I'm open to people telling me I'm wrong. I just gut feeling that doesn't seem like that's solving anything.
Yeah, it seemed very, even the comments that his son was posting seemed very victim-minded. And if he is a victim, I mean, we just have to tread carefully there.
Yeah.
Allison says, I've been through family estrangement issues, and my entire family said things they regret. But you can't judge or make an opinion based on one argument. People don't understand the full story. Yeah. So one of the comments on another YouTube video I was watching on this made a good point, saying if your single greatest failure was taken as a snapshot, and we've all got those things that we regret, those nobody's perfect, we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. If that single failure was posted and blasted out on the internet as a representation of who you are as a person, I don't think any of us would want that, right? We've all said things probably If
the beginning of this show was blasted out the internet as an example of my technological skill.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, you're right, Allison, that I think we do have to have grace. But, again, not to ignore sin where we see it either. So there is a balancing act here. I don't know if anybody heard it, so I'm just going to paraphrase here. I had read 1 Timothy chapter 3, and so it talks about the qualifications of eldership. And so we kind of went into this other adjacent issue of Christian celebrities. And when we place them on a pedestal, is that placing them kind of not in the office of elder, but that we kind of place them as a role model, at least for Christians. And so when they fall short, we see the fallout from that is a lot more severe. Right. And so, should we apply some of these same qualifications of eldership to even those Christian celebrities, or should we even have Christian celebrities? That's a whole other topic altogether. But just a couple of these qualifications, a few that I thought were particularly appropriate to this, is that the overseer should be above reproach, temperate, self-controlled, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, must manage their own family well and see that their children obey them, and must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? So even right there, it's not to say that we can't have grace, but as somebody who is lifted up as this role model in the church, we need to be very careful when there is underlying family estrangement issues and, not managing your own household well. Is there something to be said there with all that?
I mean, look, you're talking to a guy who was a big fan, shall we say, of Ravi Zacharias. What lesson do we learn about that? And I think we talked about this. Shoot, there was another show we had a conversation similar about this about Christian celebrity. Now I'm blanking on what the specifics of it were.
Was that the Carl Lentz story?
Maybe
Hillsong?
Maybe, I can't remember. But I mean, the point is that I think that, look, certainly when someone becomes a Christian celebrity, and maybe that's weird. I remember talking at some point about the fact that I hate that term as applies to Christians who have a broad audience, Christian leaders who get a broad audience. But I think that, obviously when someone gets in that position, a quote I love from the great, amazing Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yep.
So there is a certain responsibility and a heightened responsibility to God when you have that kind of platform. At the same time, I don't think that we non-celebrity Christians, with our, 1,089 subscribers, I think we're up to right now. Maybe we lost a few after the start of this episode. But, we can't excuse our hand in it by just saying, oh, well, they're celebrities, so they should know that they have a higher responsibility. Because we, and I'm not speaking specifically of anyone in particular, as we as the Christian church in general, they're celebrities because we put them there.
Right.
Because we treat them that way, because we act like they're that way.
Buy out the venues.
Yeah. And so when we do that, we also are somewhat complicit in the impact it has on Christianity when one of these people falls. Now, I do not mean to say, by any stretch of the imagination, that we are as complicit or responsible as the person, the Ravi Zachariases, and that do things like that. No. But understand that their fall wouldn't have as much of an impact if we didn't elevate them so much. And so that's part of the problem in stories like this.
Yeah, and I think to a degree, celebrityism is kind of a given in the media-driven culture that we live in. So it's kind of, when you have anybody speaking out over media, you're going to have followers. And so it's almost an inevitability. So I don't think we can demonize celebrities just on the basis of them having a large following, a large platform. It's what they do with that platform, and do they understand the higher calling and greater accountability, and are they connected to a local church that will help them through those things? Because there's a great quote here. Just real quick, it was on an article from Desiring God, but it talks about Christian celebrityism, and it says, let's see here, don't idolize celebrities, but it also says that some Christian celebrities today, if you scratch under the surface, are actually not involved with the church, and that is a serious warning sign. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of that old adage that it's lonely at the top. And so, how can we as the Christian community support them too in this way? And I think there's a great opportunity here with Kirk Franklin and his son to, first of all, be praying for them and actually do so. Don't just say that I'm going to, and what are some tangible ways that we can
and
help our brother out.
It's not easy thinking about the celebrity issue. I mean, I'm thinking from the Christian in the pew situation. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you, we've got we built this channel up. We've got over 1,000 subscribers now. I'm very pleased with that. And so part of me is like, I want to continue to grow because I want to reach as many people out there as possible. So I certainly understand the desire to be in a position where you're doing as much as you can for the kingdom and reaching as many people as you can for the kingdom. Always subject to that's what God wills for me. I'm also a big believer. I love that song. I can't remember who sings it. Maybe somebody out there could help me. But the lyrics are, I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me. What's the rest of the song? And that basically is, I want my life to, I don't care. When I pass away, I don't care if anybody remembers a single thing about me, as long as they remember Jesus. And, and my life has pointed them towards that. So it's a difficult balance to strike, because you're right. In our media culture that we live in, inevitably, the broader audience you get, the more the media is going to, whether it be Christian media or whatever, is going to try to put you up on that pedestal. And I think we as both the people who are those celebrities and us in the way we treat them need to understand that and foster a culture where they are seen as, yes, they have a big platform. The
song is called,
but they're the same as the rest of us.
The song is called Only Jesus, and it's by Casting Crowns.
There you go. Okay.
I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me. Only Jesus.
There you go. Cool.
I've only got one life to live. I'll let every second point to him. Only Jesus.
I love that song, and I love the message of that song. And so, anyway, all right, we got to move on because we don't have as much time since we lost the first half hour.
Speaking of platforms and being used for God's glory.
Okay, so our next story here comes from FaithWire, and it's about even the headline I think is somewhat deceiving here, because the headline here says pastor responds to Reverend, in quotes, who claimed Jesus was racist. Now the Reverend who's being discussed here is a gentleman by the name of Brandon Robertson. Now he refers to himself as I think it was a TikTok video, if I remember, it was TikTok or Twitter, as Reverend Brandon Robertson. But of course, there's, as far as I can tell, and I did a little bit of research on him, he has no ordination whatsoever by anybody.
I don't believe so.
All right.
Yeah.
So he calls himself Reverend. He went to Moody Bible Institute, so he has some education in that regard, but he has no ordination, but he calls himself Reverend Brandon Robertson. And he is, I think, what you'd call an example of progressive Christianity. I mean, that's definitely his theology. At one point, I read something that said he actually was he had some program, I guess Moody must have a radio station or something like that, and he had a program on there which was canceled because he started advocating for more progressive Christian causes. Well, in a recent video that went viral, Mr. Robertson used the example of the Syrophoenician woman and made the claim that Jesus used a racial slur. And if you remember, this is when Jesus, and you look it up the scripture for me.
Yeah,
I don't have
Mark
it in front of me.
chapter 7.
Yeah, because you give me the exact words. But basically, we talked about, he referred to her as a dog. And then she responded, well, even the dogs get the scraps.
Yep.
And he praised her faith as a result of that. And the take that Mr. Robertson had on this story was that Jesus was racist, that there was between the Syrophoenicians and the Jews, there was a lot of racial animosity. Jesus' first reaction was to use a racial slur toward her, but then her comments back to him kind of convicted him of this sin, all right? And he then had a change of mind and a change of heart, repented of his sin, and then gave her what she wanted. And this Mr. Robertson went on about how reassuring this was to him personally to see. I mean, essentially, if I were to paraphrase, it's like Jesus was a human just like us, just fallible. I can identify with him more because he sinned too and he made mistakes too. I got some strong feelings about that. But do you have the scripture pulled up?
I do, yeah. So we can read.
Yeah, go ahead and read that and then tell me what you thought about it.
Yeah, so this is Mark chapter 7 is where he's pulling from, verses 24 to 30. So it says, then Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. And in other gospel accounts, Jesus says in there, great is your faith, woman, great is your faith. For such a reply, your daughter is healed, essentially. So we see multiple problems with this. I think he starts from a faulty. We just talked in the last story about not passing judgment, but I'm going to call it here. It's a heretical assumption that Jesus was not divine. That's the assumption that Jesus was not divine, because he says that this woman speaks truth to power. That's his phrase. He said this woman speaks truth to power. And in saying that, he's saying that this woman had a handle on the truth and Jesus did not, right, even though Jesus is the truth and the way and the life. So this woman had to show Jesus the real truth, the real woke truth, and he had to then repent. So this Jesus, whom Mr. Robertson is presenting, is no Jesus at all. He goes by the name Jesus, but he is no Christ. He is no Savior. He has no power to save even himself, let alone anyone else. And so that's the faulty assumption under this. And, even here when he talks about the phrase that he used, it's not good to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Well, first of all, the word dogs there, I made a note because in the Greek, I know we talked about not using too much Greek, but the Greek here is kunarios. It's a diminutive, so it's more like he's saying puppies. It's a household dog, not like a wild dog. So it would, in the culture, that would have less of a sting to it. He's not like calling her a wild dog. He's like, and he's not calling her that out of a racial slur. He's doing it to draw out her faith. Jesus is not surprised by this woman's reaction. This woman's not surprised by his reaction. She knew that him being a Jewish man, this is the assumption that first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. Salvation is for all people, first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. There's this order of things, and Jesus is drawing out her faith that even though she says, yes, Lord, I know you came to bless the Jewish people first, but I need something now. My daughter's got this problem now. And so she said, just toss me the scraps, toss me a bone, basically, throw me a bone. And he said, great is your faith, for that you are healed. So it's not, he's reading into it something that I don't think is there.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I mean, there's two levels I'd like to address this on. Number one is just the implication in the first place that this is a racial slur. If you don't see this as a metaphor, then you're blind. I mean, to begin with. I mean, it's just forgetting about Greek. I mean, just looking at it in English. Yeah. If you don't grasp this as a metaphor, I'm going to try not to say anything too mean here, but I mean, because it talks about, it's not fit to take what's meant for the children and give it to the dogs.
Right.
Well, is every Jewish person a child, literally?
Right.
No. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that, I mean, was children a term of endearment at the time? Is that what he's trying to claim? I mean, there's just no parallel. Mm-hmm. You have to read it fully in context. And clearly, you don't just read one word. You read the verse in light of the chapter, in light of the book. Right. And clearly, this was a metaphor that Jesus was making. On top of that, so how do you get to that? And you get to it, we called it before, eisegesis. Mm-hmm. It's something that you want to be in there, and so you put your 21st century glasses on and you read it in light of your 21st century assumptions instead of reading it in the context that it was, like you were talking about, how it would have been taken at the time.
Right. And
that's how you get to that kind of conclusion of calling this a slur, when clearly in the grammatical context and in the historical context, it was not. Before I get to my second point, we have a comment, right?
Yeah, I think he's reading out of the NWV, the New Woke version. Yeah, Allison says, she says, does this Reverend believe that Jesus died for his sins?
Oh, because Allison, perfect. Sorry, talk about my second point. Go ahead, finish it.
Because if Jesus sinned, then this Reverend will not have the forgiveness of sins.
Yes.
Then Jesus would not be
perfect. Yes. Thank you, Allison. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here. This is why I wanted you to be on the show last week, Allison, because we're thinking alike. You say even better than I do, but that was my second point. Exactly, is that. Do you think through the implications of what you're saying?
Right.
If Jesus was a human being, and only a human being, he was fully human, don't get me wrong, but and a sinner,
right,
then there is no atonement. One sinner cannot pay the price for our sins because he's got his own sins to atone for.
Can't even save himself.
Exactly. And so do you think through the implications? And this is why, I know we talked about this on a show probably several months ago now, especially within a lot of the progressive Christianity movement. What you see is redefining what salvation means, because you can't, if that's the Jesus that you're celebrating, this human sinner Jesus, then you can't get from there to the Orthodox understanding of salvation, because you just can't do it. Exactly.
What are we saved from?
And so they then redefine it as, salvation. It's very, lots of times it's very earthly terms. Salvation is liberation from racism, for example, or liberation from this or that or the other here in this life. And it gets to the point where you have to, I think, genuinely ask, at what point do we draw the line and say, you may be using the name Jesus, you may be using the term Jesus Christ, but at some point, your belief system departs enough from it that is it really fair to call it Christianity anymore? And to use a WandaVision reference, it's the Theseus' ship, which my wife clearly wants to.
No, I was gonna say, you keep using those words, Jesus Christ. I don't think they mean what you think they mean.
You can use the Princess Bride reference. But Theseus' ship, for those of you that aren't WandaVision fans, have you seen WandaVision?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not really spoiling anything about the plot, other than the fact that they talk about Theseus' ship in WandaVision in a fantastic, unique way of climaxing a battle scene. But anyway, the idea is that if you have a ship, Theseus' ship, and then you replace one board on it, okay, is it still Theseus' ship? I think we'd say, yeah, you just fixed a board. Now replace another one, and another one. Now you change the mast. Now you do this. At what point have you made so many changes that it's no longer accurate to call it the original ship? It's now something new.
Right.
And I think when you get into these theological things where all of a sudden we've redefined Jesus, we've redefined salvation, we've redefined so much. Is it even still the same thing? Is it even fair to call it Christianity anymore?
No.
Well, that was short and sweet.
Well, no, I mean, really, honestly, if it's deviated so far, it's and similar to the Theseus' ship example, I forget who it was, but talking about modern Christianity is the example of a hatchet where someone says, this is my grandfather's hatchet. Although my dad replaced the blade, I replaced the handle, my son's replaced the sheath, Is it my grandfather's axe anymore? No. That built this house that we live in. So, yeah, I think all those to this point, I think it's to any true believer, any true Christian, this is pretty plain still, I think. If you read it in its context, it's pretty plain what Jesus is saying here. And so to read into it that far, it's just so far outside the bounds of Christianity that it's...
Well, and I think one thing I'd like, before we move on to the next story, one thing I'd like to impress upon anybody that is watching is, so what happens if you come across, you will, I mean, if you are out there talking to people, you will come across this type of theology. What do you do when you come across someone like this? And I think what you do is you don't necessarily get as, I got a little bit of enthusiastic here, I think, in this story, but you ask questions. I mean, a lot of these points that we're raising, someone is much more likely to acknowledge or change an opinion. It's not easy to get anybody to change an opinion, but you're going to have more success doing it if you help them come to the conclusion themselves rather than you just telling them. So if you were to go up to someone like this Brandon Robertson and just say everything we just said, you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. But you start asking questions about, well, how is it? You can ask questions like, well, if the dog was a racial slur, then what did Jesus mean when he referred to the people of Israel as children then? Mm-hmm. I mean, how does that parallel work out? And, well, what does that mean that if Jesus was a human, then what was the point of him? What did he accomplish on the cross? And start to ask questions to probe to show potentially some of the inconsistencies in their view, and that's what you see here.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time that Mr. Robertson has said things like this. There's a video I saw back from 2018 where he was talking about how, of course, he identifies as openly gay, openly homosexual, and there was a Q&A session with his church, and they're sitting on these comfy couches, and so a question came up about polyamory. So that's multiple people having a polyamorous relationship. And he says very clearly, he says, as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, or something like that. He calls himself as a minister of Jesus Christ. He says, I want you to hear me plainly. Your relationships are holy. Flat out. Right. Calls a polyamorous relationship holy. And it's not that far. Like, it's not that far of a stretch now to see that he's reading into scripture other things as well. He goes on to say, as long as you're he has a very humanistic ideals of consent and just very this life centric driven ideals. So as long as you're consensual, as long as you're striving for love and respect with your partner, then you are following Christ, that you're toward a path of wholeness and holiness. Is what he says. And so, yeah, this
if you call
is a pattern for him.
If you call Jesus a sinner, which he does, I mean, explicitly did in this instance, if you call Jesus a sinner, then literally anything goes. You have no standard. I mean, why do you look at his teachings? If he's a sinner just like the rest of us, if you find anything you disagree with, you could just say, well, I disagree with that, or I disagree with that. Now, you have no standard anymore, because how do you know that this teaching wasn't the result of his sinful nature and it was flawed, whereas this one is true? And what inevitably you end up doing is you put yourself in the place of God,
Right.
and you become the judge of which of the teachings to accept and which not to. So, hey, let's move on to our third story, shall we?
Sounds good.
This would be the one, if you missed it with all the in and out at the beginning of the show, this is the one and Ben tried to ambush me with. There was no written document that I could print out, exclusively videos, but I printed out a transcript of the videos. So,
Yeah, so real brief explanation of this story for any of you. Again, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably heard the name Jordan Peterson. He's a now famous Canadian philosophy professor out of the University of Toronto, I believe.
psychology professor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Psychology professor out of the University of Toronto. He actually came to fame back in, I think, 2016. He kind of came into the public eye where he really was going against the political correctness. He saw it as an assault on freedom of speech. So he's an advocate for free speech. And so he's really gained a large following because of that and because of his views and just a lot of the things that he says, very much common sense kind of things. He has these kind of ways that he explains, for example, get out of bed, order your life, basically. And so things that we kind of are common sense, but the way that he sells them, he's just got such a large following, particularly of younger males. And so, but one of the things that he, I guess, back into the public eye here, especially in the Christian world, is he was in a recent podcast where he's explaining that he's surprised at his belief in Jesus Christ. And now Jordan Peterson is no stranger to the Bible. He frequently talks about the Bible and dissects the Bible in his classes and his lectures. He is not a Christian. However, he became very emotional recently when talking about Jesus Christ. And the reason for that, he explains, he follows a lot of Jungian, Carl Jung, psychology. And so there's this idea in Jungian psychology called Jungian synchronicity. And so the basic premise behind that is that there's the subjective world and the objective world. So there's the things that we can see, smell, taste, touch, feel. Those are the objective things that are verifiable. They're scientific. The things that we they're empirical, that we can see. But also there's this subjective narrative world. So to Jordan Peterson, he holds up a lot of the Bible stories as having value. And in the subjective world, the narrative value, you can still derive meaning out of something even if it's not objectively true. And so what Jungian synchronicity is, it's where those two things overlap. And so he sees the overlap of that in the person of Jesus Christ. And that's where Jordan Peterson is getting to this point when he's talking about Jesus. He gets very emotional where he's talking about, he said, I've seen this blending in Jesus, because here you have not just a person who was in a narrative sense, because there's real historical evidence for the person of Jesus Christ. And so he actually existed. And so here's the person in this objective reality who embodies this narrative ideal. And Jordan Peterson's very big on archetypes and, breaking down all of that. And so he sees the fulfillment of both of those. And so he's surprised at his own belief. He said, in his own words, he's surprised at his own belief, that he probably believes in some sense that that's true, that Jesus is the merging of that, in his words. And so, but he's terrified. That's why he got emotional. He's terrified because of the implications of that. Right. So hopefully that was a good enough job explaining.
Yeah, and to some extent, some of what he said reminded me a little bit of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a big, because obviously C.S. Lewis, an author of children's literature, things like that, where he would talk about how sometimes myth, as a genre of writing, can be seen even in reality, and so he did talk about how Jesus fulfilled, certain mythological type of figures. But by that, C.S. Lewis didn't mean that it wasn't objectively real. And that's where we get into, I think, some of these issues that he's having here. And one thing I will say that a doctor, I don't know, I'm assuming he's a PhD, but I don't know, a professor or whatever, Peterson, said in there, he, in his, attempt to be, I guess, reasonable, he did make a passing comment about, well, and again, you can disagree about whether there's enough evidence out there that Jesus actually existed. No, you can't. No, you can't. Okay. Even Bart Ehrman, who is a very famous agnostic, does not believe in, he tries to draw a line between the Jesus of faith and the historical Jesus. But even he wrote a whole book about how ridiculous it is to try to claim that Jesus didn't exist, that Jesus of Nazareth was not a real person who walked the earth 2,000 years ago. No historian, don't believe what you see on the internet, all right? No historian worth their salt, Christian, agnostic, atheist, thinks Jesus didn't exist.
He's just as verifiable as Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence is overwhelming in that regard. So that I thought was a little bit telling. It's like, okay, we don't, I'm trying to be as courteous to everybody out there. Well, some things he's like, no, you've got to call a spade a spade. But leaving that aside, the overall, when you get into these subjective versus objective melding, what basically you have, if you were to strip away all the philosophical mumbo jumbo, is you end up with a situation where somebody is saying, whether it's true or not, I think it's kind of cool, and therefore I'm going to believe it. Yeah. I mean, that's the stripped down philosophy. And lots of times I think, whether it be with postmodernism or anything like that, that's what we need to do. We need to take all of the rhetorical flourish off of it and say, here's what you're really saying. Does that sound like it makes sense? And so a lot of people look at this and say, well, maybe he's really close to becoming a Christian. And I don't know. I don't know what the Spirit's doing in his heart. He clearly was having an emotional time with all of this. But fundamentally, a lot of what he was saying really boiled down to that, where he was, even the statement about conceding some ground, like, well, you can debate whether or not he really existed. It's getting that back to, well, whether this these stories, the resurrection, may or may not have been literal, may not have been objective, may not have really happened, but we should still believe it. I'm struggling with the fact that I think maybe I should still believe it because the narrative, the story around it is so beautiful and so useful. One of the things he talks about is morality and where you derive morality from. And we talked about that before, I won't go into it right now, but in order to have morality, to have objective morality, where some things are actually morally wrong and some things are actually morally right, you need God. You need God. If God does not exist, right, you don't have those. Morality is nothing more than personal preference, or communal preference, or whatever you want to call it. And so where he should be going when he realizes the value of Christianity in explaining morality, what that should be doing is pointing him towards the objective reality of Christianity, of God, of Jesus, and all that, as evidence of that, instead of him still trying to cling to this fact that, well, I don't know if it's objectively true, I don't know if it actually happened, but it has value in it anyway, so I think maybe we should believe it. So I still think he's not as close to Christianity as people think he is.
Well, and that's an important distinction to note, because when people say he's close to being saved, I mean, there's
what does that mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. There's a confusion of terms here, because you're either saved or you're not. Now, it's not like salvation is a sliding scale, because it's not of our own merit, right? It's you're saved and that's it. There's a sliding scale maybe of sanctification.
Maybe they just mean there's a lot of pebbles building up in that shoe.
Maybe that's right. Yeah, to use that analogy of putting a pebble in someone's shoe, and maybe. And I find it very interesting.
But how do you know? And different people can tolerate more pebbles in their shoe than other people can.
Some people's Dr. Scholl's are run deep.
Well, it's that whole Princess and the Pea thing.
Yeah. I find it very interesting and even telling to a degree when he says, I'm surprised at my belief, and then to look underneath that, what actually is he saying? What actually is his belief in? His belief is in that Jesus meets this Jungian synchronicity, but not that Jesus is Lord and Savior. Those are two very different
things, right?
Things and conclusions to come to. But it's also very telling that he says it's a terrifying prospect, because he realizes that if A is true, then it's very plausible that B is true, that he is who he said he was.
Right. So there could be some conviction going on.
There could be. And we pray that that's true, that God will work on his heart, because there's that disconnect between the heart and the mind. Faith is not all heart, it's not all mind. It's, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so we pray that God is working not only on his mind, but on his heart, on his convictions, specifically to come to a conviction of sin and the need for salvation and justification. And so I think where he's getting emotional, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I think the emotion has more so to do with a fear of an entire paradigm shift for him, that he can't continue down this path.
Well, and a lot of people, you see that, I think that you see that a lot, where people are, even when they start to be confronted by that fear, I've seen many people, it doesn't necessarily lead them to embracing Christianity. Instead, it leads them almost to a denial and anger. You see a lot of people who are now atheists, you really start talking to them, it's almost not, again, I don't want to generalize, not all atheists are like this, but a lot of them really come across as they're more angry with God.
Yeah.
And it's like, who are you angry with?
If you don't believe he exists.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's where that comes from. So, all right, we need to move on to our last story because we do have to be off the air before 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock tonight. Please stay on the YouTube channel here, or if you're on Facebook, go over to the YouTube channel for our 4th week in our Lent at Home series. Tonight, Ryan McAllister is going to be delivering the message during Lent at Home, and he's really going to be showing the way. This is cool. I don't know if he talked to you about his message at all. I'm not going to spoil anything other than to say Ryan is a musician, and he definitely utilizes that in his message tonight. So it's really kind of a neat message and a neat take. And then Lori Hinman is going to walk us through the prayer of Jabez tonight. So,
awesome.
So make sure you join that at 7 o'clock. Our last story of the night is a Supreme Court case, and there has to do with the headline here in this particular version of it: Supreme Court sides with students in speech zone case. Essentially what happened is you had a couple of students who were at from Georgia Gwinnett College. And what the students had done, there was one student in particular who had tried to distribute religious pamphlets, Christian pamphlets, I think it was just outside the library or something like that. It was outdoors, outside a campus building. And he was approached by campus police, told he couldn't do that. He could only distribute religious literature in these particular free speech zones. These areas of the campus of the college are designated as being free speech zones. But the total, I've got to find a number here, but the total amount of acreage, 0.0015 or something like that. It's like the amount of campus space compared to the overall campus that they designated as free speech zones was minuscule, to say the least. And then on top of that, they said, and you need to get a permit for it in order to do it. So you know what? He didn't argue. He got a permit, and he went to distribute his pamphlets in this little zone. And then he still got told he had to stop because they said essentially he was offending people. And their rules in the free speech zone is it's free speech as long as you're essentially not offending people. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it was. And people complained that that his distributing Christian literature was offensive. And so they still told him he had to stop. And then there was another student who said that he was going to do something similar, but actually was dissuaded from doing so because of the way this first student was treated. Well, lo and behold, what happens is the students sue, and they sue for two things: what's called injunctive relief, which is to get the court to order the college to change their policy, and what's called nominal damages. Nominal damages is, when I can show that I suffered some legal wrong, but I wasn't harmed financially or any way, or I wasn't physically injured, and so I can't necessarily show what's called compensatory damages, but there still needs to be some acknowledgement of the fact that you did something wrong to me, all right? Well, what happens, of course, in the meantime, while the American, I can't remember which organization it was, one of these organizations took up his cause, and while the case was going through the court system, two things happened. Number one, the students themselves graduated. So now they don't have any more rights to speak on campus and complain, because even if they win their case, they wouldn't be allowed to. They're not students there anymore. And the other thing was the college actually did change its policies. All right. So the argument was that the whole case then becomes moot. Mootness doctrine legally just basically means it's really, there was a dispute, but now there isn't anymore. We're not going to waste the court's time with that kind of thing. The Supreme Court said, so excuse me, the Supreme Court said, well, even though the injunctive relief part of it, the part of the case that was asking the courts to order the college to change its policy, that's now moot because the college has changed its policy. They said the case could still go forward on the nominal damages portion, so they can still go to court and get awarded a dollar or something, but the case was still allowed to survive for that purpose. So I read the story. So what are your thoughts?
First of all, I gotta say this. It is absurd what their policy was, and the thing that got me most was even though he got the zoning or the permit to be in the free speech zone and share his faith, he was still approached by this campus police officer, and they are prohibited from using the free speech zone to say anything that, quote, disturbs the peace and or comfort of the person. So apparently free speech is only free insofar as it doesn't make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's what it means. Basically, you offended somebody, it's all right, all bets are off. It's not really free.
Like comfort. I mean,
Hey, do you know what their new policy is?
I don't. It didn't say.
Yeah.
So we don't know what about the policy changed. It just changed.
They repealed at least some of this. So I'm sure that was one of the things that had to go.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, I thought they made a good point, and I think I agree with the court's decision, and I think it's a win. And even whether or not they choose to seek compensation, I think it sends a message to the organization, not even just this particular university, but other universities, because it makes a good point in here, and I can't find the exact quote, but basically they get by with prohibiting students' freedom of speech, and all they have to do is change their policy, and then it gets rendered moot, and so they can continue on this practice. But
then, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, a lot of people will cite court cases as reasons why their particular case, they set a legal precedent.
Right.
But because it was considered moot, if they hadn't put in that other request for, what did you call them, nominal
damages.
Yeah. Nominal damages.
Well,
if they hadn't put that in there, would this case would have been just sort of swept under the rug kind of thing as far as history was concerned?
The court did say that it was allowed to continue on the nominal damages claim. Now, here's where it does, and I might surprise some people here. I think this is more it was an 8-1 decision, so the Supreme Court obviously wholeheartedly agreed with this. Chief Justice Roberts was the lone dissenter. And he does have something of a point. All right, here's the issue. Keep in mind, the case was filed on 2 grounds. All right, 1, to get them to change their policy, and 2, for nominal damages. When you're asking them to change their policy, and they do in fact change their policy, then that clearly becomes moot. All right, that's gone. That's out of there. Normally, the way the mootness doctrine works, the classic example of a case that would be allowed to proceed even though it's become moot is any case involving pregnancy. All right. If I got a pregnant woman brings a suit for something involving the pregnancy, by the time the case gets decided, she's going to have had the kid. All right. And so, but because whatever the issue was in her case might affect other women later on down the road, if the case is allowed to continue, because given the nature of pregnancy, every case would always be moot. You would never get the issue decided. All right. And so that's where, even though this specific case becomes moot, it's still allowed to proceed to go forward. So I can see, and I'm surprised the court didn't seem to grant it on this ground, then them saying, yes, this particular case, as far as the injunctive relief is moot because they changed the policy. If anything, I would think they would say, but because it's an important issue and we need to make sure that, other colleges don't do this, we're going to allow it to continue. Maybe you try to work it around on that ground. But what Chief Justice Roberts' concern is that if the only reason the case is allowed to go forward is because you still have this nominal damages claim, that means basically the courts are going to end up litigating a whole bunch of cases for $1.
Yeah.
They're only worth $1. And when there's really no fundamental dispute between the parties.
Right. And that's, I think, where I was trying to find it. I think I found that it says, holding that a nominal damages claim is insufficient to continue a case or controversy eliminates any possibility for an attorney fee award. This would deter litigants. 33
cents the attorney's going to get. That one, I got to admit, that one was kind of vacuous to me.
Okay.
Because nominal damages are not called nominal for a reason.
Yeah.
No attorney's getting paid out of a nominal damages award.
Right.
So
it says this would deter litigants and attorneys from pursuing constitutional claims that lack a compensatory damages component. expanding opportunities for government officials to violate constitutional rights.
Well, and that's the kind of case you get paid by the hour for. I mean, honestly, if I had a case like this walk into my office, you're not taking it on a contingency fee basis because there is no money to get out of the case. And there never was. I mean, you're not getting paid out of a nominal damages award. If somebody wants to pursue this case as a private attorney, they're paying you by the hour. So it really doesn't have that deterrent effect. But it's kind of, but technically speaking, if you've asked for nominal damages, keep in mind the whole point of nominal damages is an acknowledgement.
Can I just ask a question? Did Chief Justice dissent because he thought it should have gone on because of the other reason and not the nominal damages?
No, he thought that nominal damages alone,
or did he just think it
he
needed
did not
to
think
stop?
cases should be allowed to proceed just on nominal damages because of the overwhelming glut that could possibly open up for the
but
courts.
did he think it should have continued on the other basis, even though
No, I
it
don't
was
think anybody did that.
Oh.
Because they had in fact changed their policy. And so that's, but my point is this. I mean, technically speaking, though, I think the court still got it right. While I think the Chief Justice does have a point, and it's not a pleasant conclusion to realize that this could result in a lot more litigation. It really could. The fact of the matter is you still got two different claims there. You've got one asking to force the college to change, and you've got one nominal damages. And the nominal damages, even though it looks minimal because the dollar amounts that are always awarded are minimal, it still serves a fundamental purpose.
Right.
And the purpose is acknowledgement that you did something wrong to me.
Right.
You know, that there was a legal wrong done. And that is a right that people have to bring before the courts. And so while it's certainly inconvenient for the courts, potentially, if you've got a whole bunch of cases going on that are just asking for nominal damages, you know, it's still people's rights, and that we have to do. The other thing, I think his concern might be somewhat overstated for the reason I said before. I don't think you're going to see a whole glut of cases that are just on nominal damages because attorneys have no way to get paid out of a nominal damages award. You would only have clients who are willing to pay attorneys several $100s per hour to pursue a case that they're going to get $1 out of.
Right.
You know, if you want to pay me to do it, I'll do it, but not now. I'm only in-house counsel.
I know,
but you know, but I don't think you're going to see a huge influx of that.
But the problem is that to me, it seems a lot like the whole pregnancy issue.
It's about the principle.
You've got a university, and they obviously were fighting it up until a point.
Right. Do they turn around and reinstitute the policy once the case is gone? I mean, that, you know,
or
and just keep changing it, you know.
Or they just keep handling policies like that with their students, where they'll fight it until they graduate the student, and then they'll go, okay, we'll change the.
Well, and to be
because
fair,
then you're still not getting your way. He still didn't get to distribute his literature.
If it was just a graduation, I'd agree. If it was just a graduation, then this is the classic pregnant woman scenario.
Yeah.
You know, if they didn't change their policy, all right, the key factor to me is the fact they changed their policy. That's what makes it a little more.
Yeah, but what
gray.
if they change? What if they change it back?
That's the concern. If you don't have a court order saying that, and that's why I think there is an argument that it should have been allowed to continue on those grounds.
Yeah.
So, but that's not what the decision was. So
Yeah, I know.
it is what it is. So anyway, what time we got? We've
5
got
minutes, 4 minutes.
4 minutes until the next show. Now, we're not as pressed because it's not like when Bill's class was going on, there was another live stream. It's just a premiere. We can have a live stream and premiere going on at the same time. But we want people to watch London Home.
Right.
So we're going to sign off. Hey, for those of you that have stuck with us through all of this, thank you very much. I apologize for the technical issues at the beginning of the program. But hopefully we'll get those fixed and worked out before next week, so we won't have a repeat of this. But thank you very much for all of you who joined in the conversation tonight. If you're on Facebook, go over to Trinity Talk YouTube. And by the way, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click on the little bell to get notifications when we put up new videos. And hey, watch Lent at home. So Ryan McAllister will thank you for it. Personally, I'll make sure he sends a thank you note to everyone.
Stop.
That's all we got. All right. So thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you to all watching out there. See you next week. God bless.